Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon to all. If you're joining live, hello if you're watching this recording afterwards. So very happy to be here with quite a large group to present on our new Global Research Council survey on responsible research assessment. This is work that we've been building towards for quite a while in partnership between the GRC Responsible Research Assessment Working Group and RORI, the Research on Research Institute, which aligns quite well with some of the other work that we've been leading across the GRC. And so before we go into the survey itself, I wanted to give a quick overview of what our working group is, some of our key objectives, and the new dimensions of responsible research assessment framework that the survey aligns with. And so we can move on to the next slide. And I'll say very quickly, I'm Sean McGurk. I'm one of the two co-chairs for this working group. I am with NSERC, the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada. We also have Mohammed Al-Shamsi, who will be closing out the presentation and who we will meet later on. So the vision of our working group is for GRC participant organizations and the organizations they fund to embed approaches to assessment that incentivize and reward the diverse attributes of research excellence in support of a better, healthier research culture that supports rigorous research undertaken to the highest standards. And this is something that we advance through a set of core objectives, the four of which can be summarized through a shared understanding, through shared practice, coordinated action, and furthermore, providing ongoing support. And on the next slide, you'll see that our working group comprises 24 funding organizations from 21 countries across the globe. Our working group was created in 2021 and has grown since. Our membership includes representation from every region of the GRC, ensuring a worldwide perspective and outreach amongst funders. You've already met us as co-chairs. Our secretariat is from the UKRI, as well as from my team here at NSERC. So on the next slide, you can see the progress that we've made throughout the last several years. And so our working group really started through a conference that was established through the GRC on the topic of responsible research assessment. This was underpinned by the first Global Research Council RRA survey that was conducted in October 2020, again, in partnership with the Research on Research Institute, which led to very interesting results and a report, which you can see on the top left, in the middle there, on the changing role of funders in responsible research assessment, which really led us into quite interesting conversations at this conference that included over 1,000 attendees. Following this, we had our annual meeting of the Global Research Council, which endorsed a call to action following on from that event, which established our working group. And so this working group has conducted its work, developed its objectives, published an action plan over a year ago. And at the most recent annual meeting, this past May, we published or announced the publication of a report on 11 dimensions of RRA. This is not online yet, but will be online soon. We also launched a new framework for case studies on RRA. And I've already begun work on 5 case studies, but also have a call to action for more case studies to be submitted and developed. And now also launching the second GRC RRA survey. And so this has been shared with the heads of research councils across the GRC back in May. The survey is now due on August 1st at this time. And we'll go through some of the elements of this a bit later on. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about the dimensions of RRA themselves, given that this really concretizes this into the core work of the GRC. And so these dimensions align with objective 1 of our working group, to advocate globally for the importance of RRA for improving the quality of research assessments. We work towards a shared understanding and goal for RRA within GRC participants and funded organizations within them, based on existing definitions of RRA. So not trying to reinvent the wheel, but trying to describe what we mean when we talk about RRA from a global perspective. We can move to the next slide. And so from this, we developed 11 dimensions in total. This is actually based off of some of the earlier work from that report that had been published in partnership with Rory, which outlines some dimensions that aligned with responsible research assessment. We took that concept further and broke them down into 3 different categories on guiding principles, governance and strategy, and process and methodology. And so for the first 4, we've outlined these principles wherein as research funders consider the adoption of RRA best practices, they should be guided by the foundational principles that enable a healthy research culture that align with the shared values of the GRC. These guiding principles are outlined through the first 4 dimensions of RRA. And so these are, first, a responsible commitment to and promotion of research integrity and responsible conduct of research. This forms the basis on which the researchers we fund collaborate in a fair, innovative, open, and trusted research environment, and enables the trust and confidence in the methods used in the funding that results from research. Second, responsible approaches to incentivizing open research, adapted to the context of each research community, implemented at an appropriate pace to promote socialization and acknowledging the social and financial barriers therein. Third, a responsible commitment to EDI in research, which is crucial to providing fair and equal opportunities and access to excellent researchers from all walks of life, as well as to enhance innovation and creativity by bringing together different perspectives, experiences, and expertise to tackle complex and grand challenges. Commitments to EDI can impact all aspects of research, from its design to its dissemination, from training to tenure and beyond. And finally, responsible responses to the effects of global challenges and emergencies on research, as these challenges can uproot research environments and communities, and most often disproportionately impact those who are already subject to inequitable barriers. This can then further inhibit their full engagement within the research enterprise. On the next slide, building upon those foundational principles, the adoption of sustainable RRA practices by funders requires strategic vision as well as responsible governance. So the following 3 dimensions describe commitments to be considered by funders in driving both incremental and systematic change towards RRA. And so the first of these is the responsible administration and monitoring of research assessment practices. So funders should ensure they establish a responsible, well-supported, and sustainable organizational framework to administer and monitor their research assessment practices. This includes providing sufficient resources to staff, charged with developing, administering, and monitoring these activities so they can effectively guide those carrying out the assessment and ensure they follow best practices and do not resort to implicit biases or irresponsible metrics during the assessment process. Our dimension number 6 is on responsible approaches to research assessment reform. And so this should follow a responsible and robust research methodology. The issues to be addressed by the reform should be well described. New research assessment frameworks should be designed following the best available evidence. These frameworks should be tested. Qualitative and quantitative evidence of their effectiveness should be collected and should be shared where possible. The evidence collected as part of this should be evaluated and used to improve the framework, and as mentioned, should be shared with other funders to foster mutual learning around global good practices and further catalyze positive change. Finally, on number 7, responsible use of influence on institutional policies and practices. Funders should recognize the reach of their influence on the policies and practices of the institutions they support in their research ecosystem, as well as the limits of their authority in that regard. They should wield that influence responsibly, especially with respect to the autonomy of research institutions and the academic freedom of researchers, and working in collaboration with institutions and other interested parties to support socialization and adoption of any new research assessment processes. And finally, At a practical level, funders can achieve progress towards responsible research assessment by ensuring that the methodologies and processes that inform their funding decisions consider an appropriate diversity of criteria and indicators of quality and impact. Accordingly, the remaining 4 dimensions highlight the key components of such methodologies and processes that support RRA. So, on number 8, responsible use and dissemination of research assessment criteria, such that they clearly acknowledge, enable, and promote a diversity of research roles, activities, innovation, outputs, and outcomes that are produced from high quality and impactful research. The use and dissemination of these criteria should be adapted contextually according to multiple contextual factors, including but not limited to the research environments, disciplines, and societal cultures where the research is conducted and assessed. Where possible, these criteria should also account for diversity of approaches and ways of knowing, including research that's performed with broader engagement across scientific disciplines, multi-transdisciplinary, as well as sectors of society in order to foster a wide range of research profiles and career paths. For number 9, the responsible assessment of research contributions and achievements. This is outlined given that the evaluation of proposals often includes an assessment of the excellence of researchers or research teams who describe their past contributions and achievements through ACV. Funders should responsibly collect and assess these contributions and achievements by allowing researchers to clearly communicate the significance, quality, and impact of their contributions rather than relying on quantitative measures to convey the value of their work. This can include, for example, adopting a structured narrative CV format. Number 10, on approaches to impact assessment. Where appropriate, these should be considered by funders to ensure that the research they fund produces high-quality impacts while minimizing risks of harm, for example, health and safety concerns or negative environmental or socioeconomic impacts. Impact assessment approaches should recognize contextually relevant factors here as well as the set of individuals, institutions, and sectors that are involved and or affected by the research. Finally, on number 11, funders should develop responsible approaches to reviewer and panel recruitment and training by considering multiple factors to ensure that these crucial decision-making roles support the advancement of more equitable, diverse, and inclusive research environment. This includes ensuring a broad diversity of representation among reviewers and provide training to them to ensure that they follow responsible research assessment practices and avoid implicit biases. And so this provides the overview of the 11 dimensions. From here, this is what has guided and helped us to reframe some of the survey questions from the initial survey done in 2020 in partnership with the Research on Research Institute. In particular, the project team, AGORRA, a global observatory on responsible research assessment. And so it's from here that I am very proud to pass that baton along to the team for the Research on Research Institute to provide us with some more information on the survey and on some of the next steps, and to help all of you who are here to hopefully complete the survey and help build a global data set towards RRA. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Sean. This is James Wilson from RORI, the director of RORI. Stepping in, I hope, in the right slot now, Claire, to pick up the baton from Sean's excellent introduction. Thank you again from our side, from the Research on Research Institute, for this ongoing partnership, which, as Sean says, has been running now for 4 years since we began work on the initial survey. And it's been fantastic from our perspective to see the energy and enthusiasm and ongoing effects of this work across and through the different organizations that form part of the Global Research Council. And for me, it was fantastic also to attend the Interlaken meeting in person and be able to talk with more members, partners, organizations in the GRC context about the work that they're doing in this area. So let me just say a little bit briefly about the background, as it were, to this from our end. I think many watching this or involved in this will be aware, to some extent at least, of the work of RORI, Research on Research Institute. We were set up in 2019, initially by the Wellcome Trust in the UK, and a couple of universities and others to advance research on research, meta science, call it what you will, but with a view to working with research funders in particular to scale up the level of ambition and the kind of empirical rigor and robustness and comparability of that work across different research funding contexts and systems. So we work now these days with around 20 research funding organizations, about half public funding agencies, such as those that are involved in the GRC, the other half foundations, all of whom share a commitment, as the website says here, to transforming research systems and cultures through the application of robust, rigorous research on research. So that is us. If we move on to the next one. Sean already flagged the AGORRA project that is running as one of around 10 projects that we're doing at the moment through RORI. I should just say our projects are designed, co-designed and selected and involve different combinations of the funder partners in RORI. So they're very sort of co-produced, as it were, by the funder community. The AGORRA project is a good example of that. This is the Global Observatory of Responsible Research Assessment, and it came out of work we've been doing, obviously this work with the GRC, but also specific work at a national level with Research England, UKRI, and the other national funding agencies across the United Kingdom, who are in different ways involved in the design, operation, and continued evaluation of the much beloved Research Excellence Framework, which of course we've had now in the UK for the best part of 40 years in one form or another. But equivalent discussions that we see obviously running in many systems, whether it's Australia, which is currently rethinking what will follow what used to be the ERA, the Excellence Research in Australia framework, New Zealand, where they're also rethinking things beyond their PBRF, Italy, where the VQR that is run through ANVA has been going through a periodic process of review. Norway, where they continue to discuss these things. I've just come back from China, where there's a huge amount of discussion about the need to curb the influence of what they call the four onlys in the operation of the Chinese assessment, etc. I could give a whole lecture on this, which I won't. Suffice to say, insofar as there is a particular need to understand research assessment at that level, that sort of macro level of national system design, we think there's an important role to bring key players together to work collectively on those questions of design, to try out new things and ideally accelerate the process of testing, evaluation, learning across different national level assessments. And all of this, of course, is very central to and feeds into these big global initiatives that we see gathering momentum. COARA, the most prominent in Europe, of course, building on DORA and other things. So it's a particular sort of level in that much bigger debate that we're all committed to contributing to. And then just other things. Yeah, I mentioned the Chinese meeting I was at I think we can probably skip over. There's a whole surge of stuff going on, of course, in this space beyond just research assessment that I won't dwell on now in this webinar, but suffice to say, I think this is an exciting time for all of those involved in research on research, meta science, and research assessment is central to that. So yes, we've been working with the GRC since 2020. You will be familiar, many of you, with our earlier paper on this, which came out November 2020. And this new survey is intended to, of course, provide the evidentiary underpinnings and inputs to a successor paper that will come out in its final form, we hope, for the GRC annual meeting in Riyadh in 2025. So there'll be a sort of 5-year gap, as it were, between our initial analysis and our subsequent analysis, and we hope, as we'll go on to say, the opportunity to bring in input and insight from many more GRC organizations. Moving on. These were the participation levels we had last time around. I mean, it was done quite quickly, the survey, in 2020, but we had a pretty good response rate overall, 46% of organizations involved in the GRC, a bit weighted to Europe, perhaps unsurprisingly given the topic, but generally, you know, not bad in terms of global spread. I think we can do a lot better, and that's, of course, the gauntlet we're throwing down through this meeting and that we did at Interlaken. I mean, this is a real opportunity. These are important debates. We know that you are all bombarded with surveys and requests for information on a, I'm sure, far too frequent basis, but understanding these dynamics and how they're changing is really crucial if we're to continue to improve and advance these debates. So I would urge all of you in your own context to take the few minutes required to fill this in to help us to get those levels up. These were the frameworks that were endorsed by GRC participating organizations in 2020. Unsurprisingly, the GRC's own statements were top of the list. You see quite heavy levels of participation in DORA, although lower in Asia Pacific there. But of course, as you see already, this doesn't mention GRRA, which is the big sort of new kid on the block since we did this survey, and which has already 735 signatories, or is probably more than that now, in the 2 weeks since I took that screen grab. They are still predominantly, but not exclusively, in Europe, but the ambition with GRRA is, of course, to become fully global over time, and there are already there's already progress towards that that's very evident. Lots of interest when I was in Beijing, Shanghai the other day in GRRA participation. I think have we gone backwards there, or is that the next slide? That looks like the same slide as before, but yes, we continue to work. We'll be now providing the input and the support to the process of analysing those survey responses as they come in. And next slide. This is the core team. As we say, we aim to publish the working paper in early 2025 and do some kind of discussion of that at the Riyadh meeting. It will, as all our reports and papers are, be made fully available. We, of course, would hope to have the opportunity to share advanced versions of this with GRC participating organisations ahead of the final draft as part of the process. Next slide. I'm going to hand over there to Alex, Amanda.
Yes, thank you, James. So I will just tell you for a couple of minutes about the survey structure. My colleague Amanda Farven will tell you then a little bit about the analysis process, and after that we'll hand you over to our colleagues from the Grail project in Rory. So I just want to reiterate that what Sean said and what James has said, that this has very much been a collaborative process between the GRC and Rory. So we started, of course, with these 2020 questions, but these were subject to substantial discussion and reworkings from within the working group of the GRC. And also as a core team, we've thrown in our own two pence as well, because as James mentioned, a lot has really happened since 2020. Okay, so in terms of the format of the survey, it's a combination of closed questions and open questions. We have some multiple choice matrix type questions, Likert scales, as they call them. And also we have open text type responses for elaborating and providing extra detail or context or nuance on some of these more interesting questions. Anything that really comes up, we'd be very grateful if you could share those as well via the open text boxes. So I think one of the reasons for doing this seminar and for sharing a copy of the questionnaire separately from the survey is that we want to allow for planning and coordination within your organisation. So we'd suggest having a quick look through the questionnaire before starting the actual online survey, in case there's anything you need to ask others about. For the most part, we've tried to keep things light, or as light as possible, in terms of not having too many mandatory questions and having mostly optional questions that you can kind of skip past if you don't know the answers to. So, okay, that's a word on the format. If I could now move on to the next slide, please, and talk a bit about the structure and the themes. So, I won't try and cover absolutely every element that's in this survey, but a sneak preview of some of the highlights of what we cover. I think, as you're going through it, the more keen-eyed amongst you will realise that a lot of it has now been influenced by the GRC dimensions, which have just come out. And a lot of the sort of topics and issues from there we try to convey and capture within this survey. There's a few different sections that the questions are organized into. First of all, we want to know about the characteristics of the different funding agencies, for example, by region, by the size of funding agencies, their relations to government within their particular national system, whether they invest in staff development, slack resources for innovation, and so on. And we also want to follow up and look at RRA statements and frameworks, and to what extent have responsible research assessment initiatives been kind of adopted or committed to within the different funding agencies, and likewise which particular statements and frameworks have been taken up by which in which regions more than others. And that will of course allow us to track in a broad sense some of the changes since 2020. We'd also like to look at some of the practices as well as some of the sort of statements and principles that are in place. So there's quite an interesting section that's been added about peer review, experimentations in peer review, which is inspired by UKRI's excellent report called The Review of Peer Review. And this really shows that experimentations in peer review by funders is really a kind of boom area. There's a lot of new ideas, a lot of interesting thoughts and experiments going on in this space. But we're not yet sure about how extensive their uptake is within funders across GRC members. So we're wanting to look into this. And also we provide some open text type of comments in order for you to give us any kind of feedback and early insights into what it's like working with various peer review, new forms of peer review. And that will support, of course, mutual learning across the GRC community and beyond. We also have a section on what you might call research culture, so ethics, openness, responsible conduct of research. To what extent is that covered by application processes and review processes? And likewise, to what extent is that expected of applicants and awardees? So that's another interesting aspect that we're looking into at the moment. And also, I won't go into it now because I don't want to steal the thunder of my Grail colleagues, but there's a section here on AI and machine learning towards the end of the survey that wasn't there in 2020. So I think I will probably leave it there and pass you over to Amanda at this point, who will tell you just very briefly about some of the plans we have for analysing the data once the survey is closed.
Yeah. So for this data set, we will mainly be doing descriptive analysis, which means that we will make some nice figures and tables based on the questions. And then also some qualitative analysis. And while we do collect some information that are making it identifiable, all responses are still confidential, and we will be treating it as such in the analysis. So no single response will be identifiable in any of the outputs from the analysis. And that pretty much covers what I wanted to say about how we're going to analyze the data. So then I'm going to pass it over to Grail.
Hello everybody, my name's Helen Buckley-Woods. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at RRA, and I'm partnering with my colleague Denny Newman-Griffiths to lead the Grail project. So Grail is about the use of AI and machine learning technologies in research funding and evaluation. So what we're interested in this project is understanding how different funders use these technologies, and also creating a space for funding colleagues to share their learning and experiences in how they use these technologies. To this end, we've got various activities and outputs that we're currently working on. So we have a monthly workshop series. We're also going to produce some practical guidelines in the form of a handbook. And we're also exploring these matters using empirical methods. And that's where these questions come in as part of our empirical strand of work, where these questions come in this survey. So we've got 4 questions that are relating to the use of AI and machine learning. I'm just going to take you through those briefly. So the first question is, it's asking what processes are you using in AI and ML in responsible research assessment? So when you get to that question, you'll see that there's a range of applications such as the assessment of researcher contributions and achievements, the assessment of research impact, and then you've got a range of options, currently use this or it's not being used. And for all of those who want to know, for any instance of use, could you tell us if that was beneficial? So that's the first question. So then we are going to ask you what the organizational benefits and risks are of using these technologies in the governance and strategy of RRA. And again, when you get to that question, there'll be a number of options, so different topic areas. So the monitoring of research assessment processes, the administration of research assessment processes, and so on. And then you could say at great benefit to, little benefit, or perhaps you're not sure. We're also going to ask you then about what the potential risks are of using these technologies. Then the third question, we're looking at what factors affect decision making. So if your organization has explored these type of technologies in research assessment, what are the key factors that affect your decision making? So for example, things like technical factors, data factors, ethical factors, and so on. Did these have a strong effect, or did they have a marginal no effect, perhaps a moderate effect on your decision making? And then in having these conversations, where did you source the expertise? So did you go outside of your organization to seek expert advice? Was that expert advice already there, specialist advice already there within your organization? Perhaps you hired someone. So you thought, well, we need more expertise in the data team, for example. So you'll see a range of options there. Then the final question is about, when you talk about these things, when you talk about this topic, what kind of things come up? What kind of factors do you discuss? So things like the selection of appropriate data, selection of appropriate models and algorithms, the evaluation of AI and ML systems, those kind of things. And you'll see a range of options there that you can choose. As Alex said, there's free text option for all of these questions. So that includes the Grail questions. So you can say as little or as much as you would like in answering those. Okay, that's all from Grail. I'll hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Hello, my name is Ann Coitran. I'm part of the Secretariat team, and I will be going over a few frequently asked questions pertaining to the survey. So the Secretariat team has developed this living document, frequently asked questions, and we will be updating it as we receive more questions from participants. So in this presentation, we've highlighted a few questions that seem more important and that may be of help for participants trying to answer the survey. So, so for the first question, how does this work relate to the surveys conducted by other organizations such as GORRA? So the GRC RRA working group has worked with many other funders to build up our survey. So we have worked with the core members of the GORRA working group, for example. For those who don't know, the GORRA working group also launched its own survey earlier this year. And here our goal is really to make sure that our primary goal is to build upon the 2020 survey that we launched earlier so that we can evaluate over time changes in a GRC participant responsible research assessment processes. In addition, we also hope to share this data more openly with members and for the data to be reused in future analyses. So here we're really trying to work with the community to ensure that this data is more useful to other organizations and initiatives as well. will my funding organization be identifiable in the analysis which is published? So as you might have heard earlier, the data will remain, the personal information will be collected and it will be used for the analysis, but for any output, the information will be anonymized, and we will be make sure that you are not identifiable in the research output. Next slide, please. How will the data we submit be stored and shared? So the AGORRA research team stationed at University College London and Leiden University and the University of Sheffield will be using the data to analyze and the data. The raw data itself will be kept on secure and protected computer servers at University College London, Leiden University, and Sheffield University up to 10 years following the completion of the studies, so that we can have opportunity to review it as needed. Next slide, please. We recognize that, can I have help with translating the questions? So we recognize that the survey is only available in English, and unfortunately, we are unable to provide individual translations, but we have members from the GRC working group across the world, and hopefully there are members that are close enough to you that you could potentially reach out to and ask help for translation. So if you would like to speak to a member of your region, please email us at the email address indicated. Finally, the last question we felt was more pertinent. So there is a specific question, question 7.2 and 7.3, which details a list of outputs that could be used to assess research. So here, it might not be clear in the survey itself. The list of research outputs is based on the Research Excellence Framework 2021, which outlines a number of research outputs. The Research Excellence Framework is a study in the UK that was conducted to essentially study research excellence and its different components, and we have built upon this framework to use its list of outputs. You can find the attached PDF. I'm not sure if you can click on it here, but I believe it is also available on the survey as well. And here I've taken a screenshot of the Research Excellence Framework for you to essentially find it again and understand the background around it. The list of outputs is mentioned in the survey itself. So I can share in the chat the link to the FAQ document for you to be aware. And as I've mentioned, the document will be updated as we receive more questions. Thank you. I'll pass it on to the next person. I believe Claire will be taking over.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ankoi. So we just thought it would be helpful as our kind of last formal bit of the webinar to just run over what we're expecting in terms of the outputs from this work. So we're expecting to explore the initial findings and to report some initial data back at the regional meetings and the Global Research Council regional meetings, which are taking place from October to December this year. And Amanda, Alex, and the kind of research team are setting up the code as we speak for the analysis of some of these questions. So we will be able to kind of give an initial report quite quickly after the closing of the survey. What we will then be doing is publishing a working paper, and the working paper from 2020 has been kind of put on the slide deck a few times. It will be a similar type report with that descriptive analysis included, and we'll host a kind of launch event for that paper. We'll also expect to, if we can, to share some of the data in AGORRA's observatory, and one of the kind of main projects within the AGORRA project is to set up a work strand looking at how we can present some of this meta-science on research assessment back to the communities. So there will be some data sharing through an observatory, and we think there are some quite exciting things we can do with that in terms of how we present the information back to those who have reported to us in the survey. The data will also be available, as many have mentioned, in a repository, so so it can be mined, and that's de-identified data. So individual organisations and individuals won't be included in that data sharing. And then at the GRC annual meeting 2025, that's when we will present kind of the main working paper and probably some of this observatory functionality as well at Riyadh in 2025. One of the kind of things that we haven't mentioned yet is actually the opportunity that the annual meeting in 2025, one of the 2 topics that are being discussed by the GRC, I think the title is something like the use of AI in research management. So those additional questions that that Helen went over that weren't asked in the 2020 survey, actually that's a really robust set of data that we can present back to kind of feed into this wider topic about how AI is used in research management, and research assessment is one of those kind of key functionalities. So there's a really interesting and clear link there for us for the 2025 annual meeting. So that comes to the end of the presentations of today, actually, and it's down to me to chair the next session, which is a Q&A with the audience members. So obviously there's the FAQ document that Anne Coy discussed, and we're also going to be, myself and Anne Coy will be setting up 2 short Zoom meetings where you can just drop in. They're not going to be formally structured or anything, but if you have any questions that crop up as you're developing your response to the survey, you can just pop in to the room, and Anne Coy and myself will be able to either answer those questions or get input from others we need to go to. But if you have any questions now, then please feel free to put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar, and myself and the panel can start to answer these any questions that you have. I'll leave it for a couple of minutes because I can't see that we've had any as of yet. As the chair of the meeting, it might be an opportunity for me just to ask one. And Alex, I hope you don't mind me picking on you, but I think as you're quite close to the literature around this topic, I just wondered what you think that this particular survey adds in value to the community.
Yeah, so I think we're not yet we don't yet have so much intelligence about the spread of responsible research assessments in the context of funding agencies. So we had that initial snapshot, which really got things going in 2020. But to my knowledge, it hasn't really been followed up in a global systematic fashion since then. So I think that's one of the things that we can really try and do. And I think one of the appeals of the observatory aspect of this as well is that we can present things. So you don't need super advanced statistical knowledge to interpret the findings. They'll be hopefully fairly intuitive, nice visual presentations to really give people a sense of what the different pathways and progresses are towards research assessment reform and funding agencies. So I really see that as the the kind of unique selling point of this particular survey.
Fab, thanks, Alex. And James, did you have anything you wanted to add to that as well?
Well, no, just again say that we do recognise the demands on people's time to fill these kind of things in, and it's not trivial. I know when there's many different requests of this kind, but I think the clear, demonstrable level of interest and impact, and the trajectory of activity that has been catalyzed as a consequence of the 2020 survey should be an encouragement to all to try and bump this one up the list and you know, take the time required. I mean, it won't take very much time at all in the grand scheme of things, but it is very important, because without some systematic route to capturing and comparing what's going on, we really are sort of floundering around in the dark in trying to assess the speed and depth and breadth of different research funder responses to these agendas. The GRC is, you know, uniquely placed. I was very excited to kind of be at the Interlaken meeting and to see how far the GRC has come as a forum for really substantive international discussion across the funding community. I mean, it really has sort of expanded out in you know, in recent years in I think a very positive way. And there, of course, there are many international meetings where different things are discussed, but I don't think there's an equivalent forum that could act in that way, certainly across the public government research funding system. I mean, of course, foundations and others are a bit different, although many of them were also present, it had to be said, in the Interlaken meeting. So, you know, all networks are imperfect, all surveys are imperfect, they all require time, but without them, we really are just sort of, as I say, staggering around, not knowing quite what's going on. So please do take the time. I'm sure it will reap returns many times the investment of effort that you have to put in. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And I completely agree with you about the Interlaken meeting. It was quite exciting to be able to be there and hear kind of the importance of this topic across the board of all of the other kind of statements and principles that have risen out of the Global Research Council. Sean, did you or Mohammed have anything to add to that question?
Not too much. I feel like you've covered it well. And there's my camera acting up again, so I'll turn my video back off. Just to mention that we're really looking forward to the results of this survey, also to outline some of the future work of our working group. So our working group has been active for just over 3 years now. We're in the last year of our mandate, and hoping to continue on past that. And we think that there's a lot of value in helping to guide funders globally on this topic. And I think that the results of this survey are really going to help to direct that in a way that really helps us to meet the need and to ensure that as many funders globally have a path forward on adopting better global RRA practices.
Thanks, Sean. I'm just looking at the Q&A, and again, I'm not seeing any questions. Either that means that we've done an absolutely stellar job, or they're about to come in a flurry via email to us as a team. But I really hope that this has given you a starting point, and we can kind of share our enthusiasm as a team across the RRA consortium, so working with the AGORRA project in the main, but also with the GRAIL project, and with the AGORRA project and the AGORRA kind of team, the working group behind that. There's lots of other partners involved in the development of the questions as well. So thank you to Rory for working with the working group from the GRC on this topic, and certainly in the Global Research Council Responsible Research Assessment Working Group, we've got this momentum behind us with the new launch of the dimensions and the survey, giving us really a really rich understanding of that progress that has been made since the GRC itself set a call to action for the participants to embed existing principles on responsible research assessment into the practice in their organization. So there's that call from the GRC statement of principles sides to make progress on this topic, and then all of the kind of fluctuating things that have been happening across the system in this area. And I think that we can learn a lot from the progress that we've made, but also learn where we need to, perhaps as a working group, share some of these practices and kind of guide and where there are gaps perhaps in the evidence base, steer our work for the next few years. And so on that, I think I will just mute myself and share my final slide and hand over to Mohammed, unless anybody from the panel wants to ask any questions. No, I will mute myself and share my screen again, if you just bear with me.
So thank you, Claire, to give me the floor. Well, if anyone have any comments for the final things, I'd like to hear from you. I believe the steps ahead is clear that first we will see the finding of the survey, then that we will draft the document, and then we'll find a way for publishing that document from this collective efforts. So anyone would like to give any final comments?
Mohammed, maybe I'll just particularly plug the element that's on the screen under the question mark, that for anyone who might be interested, and particularly for those who are only attending this particular workshop through a recording, that there'll be 2 other opportunities for support. And so on Monday, July 15th, and then Thursday, July 25th. And so the information is there on the screen with the Zoom code to be able to join those. So for anyone who is not attending today, but would like to drop in and have more support once you've started to go through the survey, that would be an excellent way to do it. Otherwise, to simply email us at the email also on screen. Back to you, Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you. So we reached the end of the session, I believe. Thanks.